Hello, everyone. Welcome. Glad to see all of your faces in the little Zoom screen tonight. I would like to thank you all for joining us and welcome to our Omaha Table Talk. My name is Candace Freeman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Programs and Curriculum Manager here at Inclusive Communities. Again, I really want to thank you all for attending our Omaha Table Talk tonight, exploring the gender binary and non-binary experience. We've got fabulous panelists and moderator today that are going to dive into that conversation with us. So I can't wait for you all to hear all the awesomeness that is in this space and in this room with us here tonight. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional homelands of the Native and Indigenous people who lived and took care of the land that most of us gather on tonight, that belong to the Omaha, Ponca, Pawnee, Oda, Missouri, Santee Dakota Sioux, Kansas, Iowa, Cheyenne, and Ho-Chunk Winnebago people. We honor with gratitude and pay our respects to all Native and Indigenous people as we are residing on their land. So Omaha Table Talk was initially created in 2003 by the Social Justice Advisory Committee of Catholic Charities of Omaha. In 2012, Inclusive Communities took over OTT and shifted the formats to more of a larger public discussion over comfort food. Over the years, we have created many partnerships with a multitude of different organizations out in Nebraska who does some of our QTTs. We've got AAPI Table Talks and Native and Indigenous Table Talks as a new addition that we have this year. Due to COVID, we have shifted to holding these conversations over Zoom, and we hopefully hope that we can be in person one day soon with all of you again, but we welcome you to have a snack or food during this discussion. We're always looking at ways to make our programming better and grow, and we invite you to please fill out the evaluation link at the end of this conversation and just tell us what you think so we can get better. I want to thank and acknowledge our sponsors, Logier Foundation, Cox Communication, and American Family Insurance, as well as our ASL interpreter, Pam, and our Spanish interpreters, Paula and Cruz. I would now like to introduce my awesome colleague who will be tag teaming this with me today, Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Candace. I appreciate it. I'm just here to do a little bit of housekeeping. My name is Colin McGrew. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a senior programming partner here at Inclusive Communities. And just to get us ready for this space here, Candace mentioned our interpretive services. So we do have an ASL interpreter, Pamela Duncan, who will be spotlighted for the entirety of today's conversation. We also have a live transcript that has been enabled as well if you would like to utilize that service. And if you would like to access the Spanish interpretation, that is a recent addition that has come this year in partnership with World Speaks. And so if you would like to utilize those services, there should be an option down there on your kind of toolbar where you can hit interpretation and add yourself to the Spanish translated channel. A few tips as we talked about translating services, just to allow for accurate interpretation when you are sharing vocally, just making sure that you're speaking clearly and you're maybe taking some pauses and trying to be as concise and smooth in your delivery as possible. That always makes it just a little bit more easy. This session tonight is being recorded. You might have noticed that on your way in. If for whatever reason you would not like your image to be recorded, go ahead and feel free to turn your camera off. The only part that will be recorded is this large session, so the breakout rooms will not be recorded. I would like to acknowledge our volunteers that we have here and the folks that will be acting as facilitators in those small breakout rooms. So thank you all for your dedication and being here as well. The final thing that I want to do is just to share some virtual agreements. These are things that we have found have helped make these table talks, especially in a virtual space, go even more smoothly. And the first is, again, if you can, be on camera, It always helps this be a little bit more interactive, but again, totally understand if you've got life happening behind you or you don't want to show up in the recording. Keep your microphone on mute. That way we can avoid the background noise collision that can otherwise happen. Try to remain engaged with the presentation and the conversation today. Try to minimize those distractions. Feel free to raise your hand when we do come to that kind of question and answer situation at the end of today's conversation. But also feel free to utilize the chat and your reactions throughout the conversation. It's always nice to see some thumbs up, some hearts, some resources and affirmations going into the chat as well. So love to see that. And then we also invite people to update their display name to include their pronouns. So if you hover over your little Brady Bunch square, hit some 3 dots and hit rename, you should be able to do that. You can also go through the participants tab as well. So we invite everyone again to update that just to make sure that we're referring to everyone in this space the ways in which they want to be referred to. So I think that's the kind of end of my gist here, at least for now. So I will go ahead and throw it back here to Candace and we can start this conversation.
Oh, I knew it happened one time. I'd be muted. Thank you. So I have the great pleasure of introducing our moderator for the night, Scout Black. I will let them introduce themselves and introduce our panel as well.
Thank you, Candace. Hello, everyone. My name is Scout Black. My pronouns are they, them, and I so appreciate the opportunity to moderate this panel tonight and learn alongside with all of you. I wanted to, again, lift up the Omaha and Oceti-Sakowin peoples whose lands we're occupying here in Omaha, Nebraska, and also want to acknowledge the impact of anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity on all of our social institutions and systems. I'll be introducing myself with the identities and social locations that I hold. I am a white, non-Indigenous, non-Latinx individual. I identify as bisexual. Okay.
Let's go ahead and pause. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. The identities and social locations that I hold, I'm a white, non-Indigenous, non-Latinx individual. I identify as bisexual, non-binary, and transgender. And I'm also a parent, a partner, a mentor, and a qualitative sociologist. So I'd love to hear from our panelists today. You can introduce yourself with your name, your pronouns if you do use pronouns, and any identities or roles that you hold.
Well, I guess I can go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Reiter. My pronouns are they, them, and their. The identities that I hold are queer, trans, non-binary, and femme, and fat as well. I live in Lincoln. I work at the food bank here in Lincoln. I also hold multiple leadership positions within the Nebraska Democratic Party, and I currently serve on the Lincoln Commission on Women and Gender.
Thank you, Eric.
I'm Ange Bennett. Default pronouns are they, them. I do prefer my name. I identify as non-binary, Black. I don't really have to say that. I think it just, I am an artist. I do a lot of work in the community around art, child welfare advocacy. I'm the co-chair of Bliss in Omaha as well. So that's a little bit of some of the things that I do and who I am.
Thank you, Ange.
Hey y'all, my name's Anna. I use they, them pronouns. I identify as white, or I am white, and non-binary and also fat. But on top of that, I also identify as a learner and future educator. I'm currently in college, and I really want to be a teacher someday soon.
Thank you, everyone, for your introductions. So our first question is, what does trans, non-binary, or gender non-conforming mean to you?
So for me, it's taken a while to just kind of define it for myself. And to me, it just means being able to exist in my own comfort with my gender. Um, it took me a long time to get there, just based on how I was raised and how I was taught what gender was growing up. Um, so just finding the comfort and the realization that it's okay to be different in that sense, and sometimes even if you're the only one, um, it's what makes you you.
I think for me, being non-binary and trans is really, it just feels like a very personal thing for me, because I think those identities and those communities are not monolithic. And so, my experience is really playing with how gender presents itself and performs, I guess. I like to use the phrase a little bit of both and sometimes neither. There are some days when I, kind of lean one way or the other on the spectrum. Generally, I do land, I guess, on the more feminine side. I've always been drawn to quote unquote feminine things. And so I guess for me, it's both kind of what Anna said, finding that comfort within myself, but also playing with that outward appearance of it and kind of defying how other people construct it for myself.
I love that, Eric. Thank you.
I've never thought about this question. So I've identified as, I guess at the time, like, how old am I now? 13 years ago, it was called like genderqueer. And so that was the cool term that you called being non-binary or gender non-conforming. And so I just kind of navigated, like, this is how I choose to dress. I've never really saw gender in anything. And it's usually not until someone either says, how are you doing, ma'am or sir, or someone else genders me or gives some type of a label to me that I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I was born, a certain way. So I still don't put a definition on it because for me, non-binary is just that. It's just existing. It's just, however you choose to navigate life, other people, yourself. And so I just live in whatever identity, I guess for me, is not really an identity. It's just me. And so I hope that doesn't complicate it for the people in this room that are actually trying to learn what it means. There's a dictionary definition of it, of course, but that's just my way of living with that identity, I guess.
Oh, and I think that's perfect. I love that. I think some of your definitions echo with my own understanding of my gender, while also acknowledging that it is non-binary in some ways is rejecting the whole concept. So I also wanted to echo and appreciate how much of an internal, like it's a very personal understanding and comfort, and as Anna said, ability to just exist in the world. But it's also external, that no matter how we identify ourselves, people will gender us in ways in the public that we might not consent to. All right. So how do you identify present day? I think all of us kind of already talked about that a bit. But I guess, what was that process like, or what did it take for you to authentically live as yourself? Whether that's as, I love, Eric, how you said a little bit of both and sometimes neither. I'm definitely in the neither ever group. But yeah, were there moments or like conversations or experiences that you had that were really part of your journey to understanding who it is that you are?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, a small rural town. So I didn't have any of this language growing up. I didn't have a lot of access outside of that world, that small town, often small-minded world. Um, and so it wasn't until I was, I think, 24 that I read Redefining Realness by Janet Mock, who is a Black trans woman, media creator, author. She created the show Pose. She's really wonderful. But there was a section in her book that kind of outlined kind of like Anne said, the dictionary definition, but that was the first time that I had ever even known that there was a word to describe how I felt, or um, that, I didn't have to choose one or the other, that I could just be as I am. And that was not this weird concoction that I had made up, that there are lots of people who feel that way. And so for me, in that sense, the label non-binary meant a lot, because it was like, oh, I'm not alone. This is a real thing. I'm not making this up in my head. But I think moving forward from that, it has just been toying with gender for me. And that means really leaning into my feminine side, um, I love to do makeup. I love to wear, more feminized, quote unquote, clothing or colors, or paint my nails, or just do things that I think people, upon seeing my body, assume that I wouldn't naturally do that. And so for me, that's part of that, kind of defying that structure and kind of making that political statement without having to say anything.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. So how do you identify today, and what did it take for you to get to the place you're at of understanding your identity or non-identity?
I probably still don't understand it and probably never will. Yeah. So my on again, off again therapist, which has been off for a really long time, they had made a statement once upon a time that said, gender journeys are long and not always linear. And I wholeheartedly believe that, because even like, especially as non-binary people, I feel like there's so often we're pulled in one direction or another. And, we may feel like we just want to sit in this in between and say, well, I'm nothing or I'm everything, but we still have the societal labels and we still have the societal pressures that say, well, no, you're dressed in men's clothes, so you must identify as a man, or you must be one, or you must want to be more masculine, or, oh, you shop in the women's section, so now you want to be this or you want to be that. And so for me, it's just always just like, well, how I feel and what I think about myself, I'm always still challenging what other people may see or what other people may feel. And that does play a part, because, that starts to get into your own head, like, oh, wait, no, wait a minute. Maybe, so maybe I need to go, if I really want to be non-binary, maybe I need to go wear, some women's shirts or some women's, this or that, and blend it. And then I'm really non-binary. And so that's kind of the struggle with that. And then also with the whole, you know, being binary trans is now this, okay, we're getting to accept that. So now we're starting to see, non-binary actors in television, and then what do they look like? How are they presenting? So now we have this label. Well, this actor says they're non-binary, so why don't you look like them, or why don't you present like them? So a lot of my journey is a lot of what the outside world perceives, and me trying to challenge and combat that narrative.
Yeah, just I mean, my own personal situation was always, I was grown up in a very be proud of your womanhood, be proud of who you are as a girl, which is completely, totally true. But I always felt like that doesn't feel right for me. like, I understand I should, empower myself, and be proud of who I am, but I don't feel like, and I never felt like the term girl or woman felt like me. And it wasn't, I was lucky where I met a few friends in high school, one in particular who kind of showed me, they were like, hey, I'm non-binary. I use they, them pronouns. And so they kind of guided me as a mentor and a few other folks along with them. So I was very lucky to surround myself with people that were very accepting from the get-go. It kind of helped me develop my own language in that I don't feel like a woman. I don't feel like a man. Sometimes I might feel like both, sometimes not at all either. But that's just kind of how I came to find out who I was.
Thank you. I think this ties in really nicely that I think all of you talked about representation in different ways. So what representation around non-binary identities or trans identities did you have when you were growing up, or were there any? I know for myself, I didn't learn about transness until I was in college. And even then, it took me multiple years to actually realize that that also was my experience. So yeah, did you have representation? What did that look like?
So, as someone who's slightly younger, luckily, I've been able to grow up in a more accepting world in some ways. And so because of that, I was just right from the get-go, I had friends that identified a certain way. I was also a theater kid, so just to fall into that trap a little bit, I had really accepting people around me anyways. So just a mixture of all of those things. The representation for non-binary folks that I had were people that cared about me and I cared about them. And I think that made a huge impact on how I saw my gender, because I saw it in people who I wanted, who I looked up to, and who had values that I respected. As far as media, I've seen it a little bit. I enjoy my goofy bachelorette, bachelor shows, so not so much in those, but some other sitcoms and stuff like that that I enjoy sometimes.
And Anna, I just wanted to echo what you said about seeing that reflected in people that you look up to. I think is super important.
Yeah, I think same for me. Obviously, there still is, it's still like a headline when a show has a non-binary character or actor. But I think for a lot of, at least for me, and I think probably a lot of people, a lot of the representations of trans people growing up were these really horrific, dehumanizing, making them the butt of the joke. And so if you haven't seen the documentary Disclosure, it's very, very good and kind of goes through all of that. But the thing that I always trace my understanding of like really loving more feminine stuff goes back to a movie called Tu Wong Fu, which was a movie about drag queens who are on a cross-country road trip and get stuck in rural Nebraska. Does not hold up. I will say that. It does not hold up 25 years later. But I think that was the first time that I kind of recognized like, oh, like these people are just these fabulous, like strutting around, bright clothing, really just feeling themselves. And I was like, yeah, I want that. I like that. Let's do that. It took me like 20 years to do it, but we're here now. So yeah, just that was that's kind of my origin story, I guess.
Side note, Anna, if you're looking for a good show, Work in Progress on Showtime. Very good. It's queer show. Very awesome. The Aggressives was mine. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of this documentary, but it is so like such a well-kept secret. And I feel like everybody should watch it at some point, but it's about masculine presenting women. But the thing of that documentary, it was like everybody in it was just like, I don't want to be a man. I don't want to be a man. And so it was just like, and I think it was just society at the time when that documentary was being filmed, it was like, well, if I go on camera saying I want to be a man, then, you know, something's wrong or whatever. Because I do know one of the people who was in that documentary actually did come out as trans a little while later. He's a well-known actor now, well-known trans actor now. But that particular documentary, I'll put the link in the chat for y'all. But it was just, it was the ball scene, but it was for butch lesbians and butch presenting women, butch identified people. And it was the ballroom scene for that particular category of people. And I was just like, oh, wow, you can do this and it's okay to do this. And there's people on TV that are doing this. And I still didn't have words at the time because I grew up Jehovah's Witness. And so in my house, there was no conversation around gender. It was kind of like, just, this is what you know is supposed to happen, and this is what you're supposed to do. And on Sundays, you put on dresses, and then you go to Bible study, you do this, you do that. And this is how you're always supposed to present. I also grew up around nothing but boys. So my cousins, my brother, the kids on the block was all boys. So there was no like thing that was said like, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that. Yet I was always outside playing with boys. But again, it was just that unsaid thing that even though you're out here doing this, you can't identify as this, you're not supposed to, but it was never mentioned. So I always crack jokes like now where I'm like, well, you know, Ma, you never said it. So if it was never talked about, how am I supposed to know it was wrong or, you know, wrong or whatever? But yeah, anyways, but yeah, the aggressives was, again, I'll put the link.
Thank
Or
you.
Candace already did, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yes, we've got a good list going already. All right. So circling back to Ange, what you had just said about kind of the unspoken pieces. So we wanted to take some time to be very thoughtful and intentional with speaking about boundaries. So a lot of times queer or trans or gender nonconforming folks are asked a lot of questions, or assumptions are made, or things are said that can be uncomfortable or offensive or just really personal. So wanted to ask what kind of boundaries us on this panel have in relation to our identities.
Personally, I don't have any in regards to my gender or sexuality. I will say often, sometimes if someone asks me a question, if I don't know the answer, I will try to redirect you because I don't know everything, unlike what some folks think. So personally, none. I'm happy to answer what I can. If I don't know, I will try to redirect you to someone who can answer better, or an online resource if I can find one.
Yeah, a lot of the spaces I occupy, I find that I am sometimes the only non-binary or trans person in there. And so I kind of become the de facto like educator or trainer or whatever. And I'm happy to do that. I'm very comfortable doing that. But I do try to set the boundary of like, you know, this 30-minute session or whatever, you can ask questions. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to be upset or offended. I know that you're coming at this with, you know, positive intent and the goal of learning. So I'm okay if you don't use all the right words or whatever. But then being really firm with them that, you know, if you ask these questions and I answer them, I do expect that you leave knowing the right words to say and knowing the right way to address people and not settling on, oh, I didn't know. And it's like, well, I just told you. So, and that's generally with more gender-based things, I guess. In terms of sexuality, I am not super open about that, just personal discomfort and probably stuff I should work on with a therapist. But yeah, I would say I'm kind of the same with gender. I don't have a ton of like big boundaries, but the ones that I set, I try to be very firm with.
Well, I'm the Glisten co-chair, so I spend a lot of my time educating. I'm comfortable doing that. I don't have a whole lot of boundaries. I'm also very sarcastic and passive aggressive. So if you ask me a question that I'm offended by, you're going to get a really passive aggressive answer, but I will answer it. So yeah, you can pretty much ask me whatever. I am, like I say, I'm open to educating people. I'm also a firm believer that if I do educate you on it and you still choose to do whatever you want to do, then you are beyond what I can give you. And at that point, I don't even want to really be associated in that space with you until you figure out the work that you need to do on yourself. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like all of us are willing to be educators within the context of knowing that we don't speak for all non-binary folks. That's something I always want to be thoughtful about. Again, thinking about the identities I hold, what does it mean for a white non-binary person to be asked to kind of speak on or represent everyone? I will share, so one of the boundaries, I guess, whenever I feel safe doing so, I always introduce myself with my pronouns. And I think that that's another way of like, maybe not establishing a boundary, but kind of setting the tone that, you know, if you're going to constantly misgender me throughout this conversation after I've told you what my pronouns are, then that's a reflection on you because I've verbalized and set my boundary if I feel safe doing so. So relatedly, what would you say to folks who want to be a good ally or a co-conspirator for trans folks, non-binary folks, gender non-conforming folks? What are the things that people who aren't in those categories can do to affirm us or create safe spaces for us?
Don't make it awkward. Like, you know what you don't know. I don't know what you don't know. Don't make it awkward. And don't try so hard. Like if like I say, I've, lived in this identity for a very long time, and you don't know my pronouns when you meet me, so when, if you misgender me or whatever, don't go above and beyond to apologize. And I can only speak for myself with this because sometimes that feels really like, oh, you're trying way too hard now. If you misgender me, okay, my apologies, keep it pushing. Because it's like when you try so hard, it does feel forced and it feels like you're not authentic in what you're attempting to do. And that's my biggest thing is like, just don't try so hard and don't force it. Because if you want to know the stuff, you're going to seek it out and it's going to eventually become second nature to you. One other thing that I could suggest is that when you are in a room, even if you're cisgender, you identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth, make it habit. If you go into a room, if I identify as she, her, I was born female, I go into a room, hey, I'm Ange, my pronouns are she, her. And that way you get other people more comfortable, especially non-binary people, because it can be tough for me because if my voice doesn't match how I'm dressed a certain day or whatever it may be, if I go into a room, I'm gonna just be like, oh, I might sit in the back, I may not speak, I'm going to adjust myself to the vibe of the room. So that's a really big thing, is just getting comfortable using your own pronouns in space, because it makes it more comfortable for me to be like, oh yeah, I'm Ange. I don't like pronouns or they, them, So there's probably more, but that's just my biggest ones.
Yeah, I think like normalizing introductions with pronouns, including she, her pronouns, he, him pronouns, folks putting it in email signatures, like that to me, like, sends a signal that this might be a safe person. or a safe space.
That's how I started picking group partners. If I saw pronouns in their bio, great, we can work together, because they'll actually respect what I use. And also just going off of that, kind of like what Ange said, try not to make a big deal out of, oh, I goofed up. Oftentimes my sister will correct her friends and call because I prefer to be called sibling. It's like, oh, your sister, no, my sibling. Just small things like that can go a really long way, in helping, your family and your friends. And then another big one is, for me personally, um, be careful when you are talking about your trans or non-binary friends, because they might not be out to everybody. You don't want to accidentally out someone, and especially if someone comes to you in confidence and says, hi, can you personally just start using he, they pronouns for me? Okay, sure, absolutely. Who would you like me to share this with? Do you want me to keep this to myself? Outing is just a big problem in general, and I think some of us have probably dealt with those issues in and of itself. So just trying to make sure that you are respecting how far they want to go or who they want to tell, because you don't want to put them in an awkward position or in a bad position.
Yeah, everything that Ange and Anna just said, absolutely. I think I'll just add that when you are working towards being an ally, co-conspirator, or accomplice to non-binary folks, like for me, I need you to be an accomplice to me as a non-binary person and also as a fat person, and really seeing all of the identities that I hold. Because if you're, you can use the correct pronouns all day, but if you're also super fat phobic, it doesn't super matter, because you're not respecting me as a whole person with, multiple identities. And I think that kind of principle especially goes even within, trans and non-binary people, for white trans and non-binary people, towards trans and non-binary people of color. That, we're seeing the whole person and not just this one identity that we can relate to, and acting as if, people are one or the other, or anything like that. So practicing that intersectionality.
All right, so we have about 1 minute left. I would like to end the conversation for the panel portion, centering around joy. So just if we can keep it real brief, how do you or how did you find joy in your identity? I can share for me something that I find joy in for my identity. I have a 6.5-year-old son, and I'm MAPA, so MOPPA. So it's MAPA, or it's mama and papa combined. He has always known me as that. And so I find a lot of joy in creating family, choosing family, and being able to do that as myself.
The thing that brings me the most joy is leopard print. I'm currently on a journey to collect at least one, of every item of clothing in leopard print, and I'm almost there. So that's something that brings me immense joy.
For me, it started out really small, but my friends were like, sir, ma'am, and I was like, no. And then one of my friends just said, captain. So even if it's just the cute little, like, hey, what's up, captain? Or if I'm in a leadership position, what's up, lieutenant? If I'm a second hand. Just some of those cute little nuances that don't have a gender, but they're still fun to call people. But yeah.
I mean, it's all joy to me. So
Wonderful. Well, we are at time, so I believe I'm passing it over to Candace. Thank you so much, Eric, Ange, and Anna.
Yes, thank you, all of you. That was amazing. I appreciate you all immensely. I know I've told you that multiple times, and I will continue to keep telling you all that. So we are now in the portion where we will go into breakout rooms. You will be sent to a breakout room here in a moment. Colin is just going to go over a few additional housekeeping things. You do not need to do anything. You will be sent there on your own. I do want to tell you though, in your breakout rooms with your table facilitator, one person does need to be a designated speaker. We would prefer if it's not the table facilitator. So just keep that in mind while Colin is going over these last few things before you head out into breakout rooms. All right, Colin, on to you.
If I can find my mute button. Yes, thank you, Candace. Yeah, here are just a couple of things just to keep in mind for these breakout rooms. The first is one speaker, one mic, so just making sure that we're taking proper turns when having conversation and not speaking over one another. What we call the Vegas twist, which our little tagline is, the stories stay, the lessons leave, but just allowing for a little bit of anonymity and making sure that we're not using people's personal stories outside of these rooms without their consent to do so. So making sure that we're rooting ourselves in the themes and values that come from this discussion and not necessarily leaving with talking points and names associated with that we're going to use in other circles. Then this notion of making space and taking space. So being cognizant about how much airtime you're taking up. We will just be in these rooms for about 25 minutes or so, 20 to 25 minutes. So it's not a lot of time. So we'll have to exercise a little bit of brevity, keeping an open mind. So again, just engaging in this conversation authentically and with genuine curiosity. And then finally, just a general be respectful, knowing that we're all here to build common understanding and have conversation based on what we just learned from that great panel. So I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. As Candace mentioned, the breakout sessions will not be recorded, and make sure that you're thinking about who that spokesperson is going to be when you come out. So I'm going to set these up here. And with that, again, I didn't receive any messages from folks that needed interpretive services. If you do, go ahead and leave your little breakout room, come back up to this main session, let myself know, and then we'll make sure we place you in a room that has an interpreter, whatever service you might need. So we will go ahead and open these rooms up, and we'll see you all in a minute.
Enjoy.
Perfect. Well, welcome back, everybody, from those breakout rooms. We just wanted to hold a little bit of space and time for people to provide some share outs, and then we can move, if we got time, which it looks like we will, to have a little bit of a Q&A situation with our panelists and moderators. So did the person from Sherry's breakout room, whoever that designated spokesperson might be, want to share out?
Yes, hi. My name is Maria. We use pronouns they, them. We had a conversation around a couple of things. I think folks overall were enjoyed hearing various perspectives, so that the panelists had, every panelist had a different story and a different perspective and a different experience that was shared, even if they may have used a similar identity label or whatnot. And things that resonated, one of the things we talked about was Angie's therapist, who said gender journey is long and not linear. And we spent some time with that, and also pushing past mistakes and don't make it awkward. So we spent some time talking about that, as well as things that resonated with us. And things that enhanced our understanding was, some of the simple things, like what Anna talked about with using non-gender language when possible, and degendering language, which we were like, it's not a word, we're going to make it a word. So that was what we talked about. And then gender norms and representation, we talked about kind of what our experiences were with gender norms and representation. So if anyone from my group wants to correct me or elaborate, please do so if I misrepresented anything.
Oh, perfect. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. What about the folks from Cammie's breakout room, whoever that might be?
So I am the spokesperson. So we had a really good conversation, and we really appreciated the diversity and the perspectives that the panel had brought forth, all identifying as non-binary, but bringing such really different backgrounds to this, which helped really everyone see different perspectives. And so then I asked everyone, what's the takeaway that they're going to take? And some folks it was overall, we're all learning in this, and we're excited to continue to learning, and they appreciated the movies and the book suggestions and the shows that were given, as that helps them on this journey. And again, the broad perspectives that each of you bring, even as individuals who may identify as non-binary, it's still always helpful to hear and see all of these. And then the basic concept that it costs us nothing. They're going to take away that it costs you nothing to meet people where they are and to just treat other people like humans and like people. It does not hurt you, and it costs you nothing to respect a person's pronouns and respect their boundaries when they're willing to educate, and then also saying, but now you know, I need you to know. And then that people are put so much time, the last one was that people put so much time into how they appear, and that can be draining. But being like a person that's in a position to be supportive, or like a healthcare provider or something, it's your responsibility to support those individuals in that, and so that it's not so exhausting all the time. And that was about it.
Thanks, Cami. Perfect. All right. Well, we will go ahead and I think re-spotlight our moderator and panelists here. And then I think Candace and I are going to kind of help moderate a little bit of a Q&A. So if you do have a question, feel free to either like unmute yourself, raise your hand, or you can also just put it in the chat and either Candace or I can kind of bring it up.
Yeah. Scout, is there anything that you would like to say before we wrap up and finish out the end of our night?
I just want to say thank you to Inclusive Communities for this opportunity, and inviting Ange and Anna and Eric and myself to come talk about something that's obviously a big part of our lives in a lot of ways. So just appreciate the time and the space, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Colin, can you put that last slide up? Because we do these conversations very regularly. We have a full lineup for our Table Talk conversations this season. So we've got quite a bit left. Our next two, we've got that date is wrong. Sorry. We have a Queer Table Talk next week, next Tuesday, talking about the health disparities in healthcare for the queer community, and that is in partnership with Out Nebraska. And then we also have another table talk following that in December, December 14th from 6 to 7:30, exploring interfaith and atheism, and just having a further dialogue about that. If you all have any questions, my email is listed there, Candace, but then also Leontine, her email is listed there as well. And she leads some of our engagement efforts, volunteer efforts. So feel free to reach out to any of us. Also, all of us are listed on our website too. So if you have a question maybe after this and you want to reach out to us personally, feel free to do so. I did put in the chat there that we will send a follow-up email in the next few days here following the conversation. It will include the link to this conversation if you want to watch it again, but then also some of those resources that were uplifted in the chat today, as well as a few additional. If you would like to continue your learning outside of this space, and we hope that you do, I do want to share in the chat, there is our link for the evaluation. Like I said in the beginning, we really appreciate your feedback, and we listen to make these conversations better. So if you don't mind, you can either take a picture of the QR code there or follow that link to fill out a brief evaluation with this conversation. And then also it's Giving Tuesday, y'all. So if you didn't know, there is some of our information too if you want to donate to Inclusive Communities so we can continue things like these and all of the other great programming that we have for our organization. That's all I have. I want to thank all of you, Anna, Ange, and Eric, and Scout. Thank you so so much for donating your time tonight to have this discussion with attendees. And we hope that you continue your learning outside of this space. This is just the start. I know Ange had mentioned something in the chat if you had any questions of how you can reach out to people. As you all heard, all four of these lovely individuals are here to educate, and I'm sure they will continue to do that. So feel free to continue this conversation and reach out if you have any additional questions. If not, I hope to see you all back at another conversation in the Table Talk season. Thanks, y'all.